Alexa Tarantino, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Dr. Thunder?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Um, I was, I was some research, um, before interviews,
Yeah.
and I did a search for, you know, Alexa Tarantino, and then I was like, okay, what if I just did a search for Alexa? What would come up?
Oh man.
And you already know. You get the joke. This is a bad joke. Um, I mean, it takes
Honestly,
me right to
it
Amazon.
it will always live on. It will live on. It's okay.
It's a terrible joke. I'm sorry. I had to do
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's better than being like, Alexa, what's the weather?
it. Yeah. Wait a minute. Don't be careful with that because I just enabled that on my phone. So
I know. That's the
anyhow, so if some devices start flashing or something during our conversation, you'll know
yeah.
what's going on. Okay. So anyhow, now that I got that goofy stuff out of the way, um, so we met because we were uh, collaborated on a Bird Lives concert that the Jazz Arts Group in Columbus, Ohio, put on, which was a um, you know I've done a couple of these now, and I thought that one was going to be the only time ever, and to be able to do it again was just like it was a real treat.
Yeah.
And the bonus was I got to play with you and got to hear you play, and you're terrific. And um, you know that I did a Charlie Parker with strings concert a couple years ago, and I actually played just Friends, and so I got to hear you play it, and that was it was quite lovely. Um, so and we talked a little bit. We talked a little bit about equipment and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
um, so it was a nice introduction.
Okay, cool, cool.
It
Yeah,
was
the
a nice.
usual. The first thing is, getting the equipment out of the way is always like the beginning of the first conversation, right?
That's right. Yeah, wait a minute. What kind of horn is that? What year was that made? A bunch of
Yeah.
stuff that does not have anything to do with anything.
Right. Like, just let me see where you are, where you're at. Where are you at? What are you dealing with?
That's right. Um, I don't know. To some folks, though, it's almost like asking them if they're a Republican or not.
It's
Because if you're repping, I
yeah.
don't really deal with those. You know, yeah, it's made in Taiwan, isn't it?
Yeah.
No.
You're like, well, I'm Yamaha. Yeah, I'm Yamaha.
Yeah. All right. Well, um, so Alexa, can you tell us, um, tell us how you grew up and what got you into playing the saxophone
Yeah, sure.
and
So,
all of that?
yeah, of course. Um, well, I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut. My parents are not musical, so I just kind of came out of nowhere with the musical bug. And the school district that I grew up in West Hartford was actually known for being super strong in terms of jazz education in the public schools. And so it was purely a coincidence that we were there in West Hartford. And when I attended, let's see, the high school jazz concert as a young kid, like a third grader, just with my parents, out for a night, I actually saw a young woman named Erica Von Kleist playing, who is an amazing musician and doubler and educator as well. She was in New York for a while, and she's since moved to Montana. Um, she had gone through the ranks in the high school and everything, and so she was the first person I ever saw play saxophone, and I kind of tugged on my mom's sleeve and said, I want to do that. I want to play the saxophone. So that was basically it from then on. Yeah, I just got the bug specifically for jazz. A lot of people will say, oh, did you start with classical? Did you start with jazz? I started with jazz. I also started with piano at the same time, piano lessons.
Mm.
I was told that my paternal grandmother played piano actually on the radio to help support her family. I never met her, but that was something. So maybe it skipped a generation. I'm not sure. So piano, saxophone, took a couple classical lessons with people, but it didn't really stick. I just really liked, I don't know, I really liked the whole jazz thing. So went through elementary, middle, high school. In high school, I was really able to sort of craft like my own music education just with all the various opportunities in the school system. So I remember by the time I was a senior, I think I had like 6 different music periods out of 8 or something like that. And I had kind of knocked out all my AP classes and all that stuff and like tried to reorganize it as best I could. So I was really into it. I was really fortunate to have just great teachers, great private teachers. I had picked up doubling pretty early on in high school, picked up or tried to develop my writing skills as well, my composition skills. So it was almost like my own little pre-college as I was preparing to apply to conservatories. And I attended a bunch of summer jazz programs too. That was always something I loved, connecting with students all over. And by the time college came around, I attended the Eastman School of Music for a bachelor's in jazz saxophone performance and music education with an arts leadership sort of entrepreneurial certificate as well. And then, I guess I can stop there.
Yeah. Who did you study with at Eastman?
So the first year I was there, Eastman still had this rule that, the students, incoming students would study classical with the classical professor for the first year. So I studied with Dr. Chen Quan Lin, who's amazing. And that was for 1 year. And then the remaining 3 years were with Charles Pillow.
All right. Yeah. How long ago, because I know Walt Weiskopf was teaching at Eastman.
Yeah.
How long ago did he leave Eastman? Do you know?
He had left actually the year, he was there the year before, I believe. So I missed him. I just missed him.
Right. Yeah, I interviewed him. I got a lesson with him when I was in college. He did a artist in residency at Western Michigan University, where I did my undergrad and my master's degree. And it was my 3rd year there. And my saxophone professor, Trent Keniston, he went on sabbatical. And so he set this thing up where he had one teacher that taught for most of the year. But then he also had Chris Potter, Walt Weiskopf, Seamus Blake. They all came and did week-long residencies.
Wow.
Though I was still pretty heartbroken that my teacher left for a year. But it was all right. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad.
Nice.
And thus far, I've interviewed 2 of the 3 of them. Haven't interviewed Chris yet. But my time in particular with Walt was, I used a lot of the stuff that he taught me, even just in that one lesson that I got with him. That whole thing about, never perform in the practice room, and the stuff about, what is it? As a professional, you have to do some teaching, some performing, and some composing, some writing, arranging. And, I really took that stuff, to heart, and obviously because I teach that stuff all the time. I'm constantly saying that. Yeah. I think I have about 5. thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video. Saying that.
Yeah.
I think I have about 5 or 6 of the things that I heard him saying that are on just constant repeat. I just hear myself saying them over and over. It's like, man, I gotta get some other stuff.
The Walt-isms.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about your writing, your composing?
Sure. So, well, I would say between teaching and playing, I think generally the composing kind of, unfortunately, gets pushed to the side a lot of the time. And the way that I've tried to sort of combat that is by having somewhat of a timeline of like when I know I'm going to try to make a record every year. So if I know I'm going into the studio in September, then like June and July and August are basically summer is like when I try to just write a ton and get it ready. So I've kind of gotten into a nice flow with it that way, but I would certainly love to do more. I mean, I do a fair amount of, I've done a little bit of, large ensemble or commissions for schools and various things like that. And so it's always when it's somebody else's deadline, I'm able to go ahead. But when it's like for my own stuff, it's just kind of like, oh, we'll see what happens.
It's interesting. I interviewed last night Dan Wilson, the great guitarist.
Nice.
It plays with Joey DeFrancesco and Christian McBride and
yeah.
And he lives in Ohio also. I think he's from Youngstown. And so he's like right up the road.
Yeah, Youngstown has a whole scene.
Yeah, that is right. I know a bunch of cats that yeah. And there's a good school there and everything. Yeah. So but we were talking about the whole composing thing in arranging and and deadlines and how that sort of interfaces with I don't know, either motivation, lack of motivation, expeditious nature of a compositional process, or sort of a lackadaisical, well, if it's when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And one thing that I note is that for whatever reason, if it's my own composition, I don't know why it is, but I always put that to the side. Oh, that can wait. That's not a big deal. That'll happen when it happens, whatever. But when it's other people's stuff, especially if there's a lot of details, like they're telling you, okay, I want it to be this long. I want it to have these properties,
Right.
go through the A section this many times, and all of those kind of things. Then it's like I can crank that stuff out with no problem.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff that is like where I don't know. And maybe part of it is because maybe I've sort of romanticized and idealized like the whole composition thing, and I have this sort of expectation that the next thing that I put out has to it has to surpass the other stuff that I've done.
Totally. Yeah, I totally feel that. I think well, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I like the whole, what you were saying about romanticizing it. It's so true. Like, I guess I only would consider a composition to be like good enough if I imagine like, oh, I have to be in a certain setting. I have to be, by myself for like hours, like on an island somewhere with just a piano and chip away at it and then go for walks and get the inspiration. It's like the reality is I might find like 15 minutes and like knock out a few chords or something, and then like you're chipping away between the craziness and you don't actually get that like desert island picture. And so yeah, there certainly is this like I don't know, this ideal sort of imagined situation for like a composer, like, and being remote and the life of an artist.
Yeah, the creative process is interesting too because it's very easy to um, so it's easy to procrastinate based on the uh, just okay. The scenario is not ideal. Look, my studio is a mess. My you know you know I really write better overnight,
Mm-hmm.
and it's during the day right now. It's like
Yeah.
finding like these reasons, or you know I think I would write better if uh if I wasn't having this, I don't know, maybe I'm fighting with a family member or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm having this tension with this family member, and see, that's the reason why I couldn't write,
Yeah.
or and and it's funny because like that's not the way that it works. It doesn't work that way. It's almost okay. So I don't want to start romanticizing composition again, see, because that's what I want to do. Where we sometimes maybe we get we get into this thing where it's like, because okay, so when I was a kid, and literally this happened, and this happened frequently. Okay, so I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I'd have a melody in my head, and I
Ooh.
would go downstairs, and I would have to figure it out. And I
Wow.
wrote a bunch of tunes like that, right? But no, now see, that might seem like a good thing. But here's how it's not a good thing. You start to expect that to happen, and if that doesn't happen, then you start thinking that something's wrong,
Yeah.
and then you start to question, um, is this meaningful what I'm doing, or am I just forcing it?
Mm-hmm.
I want my composition to be organic and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you know, one with the earth, and you want it to be all of those things. That's right.
Totally.
You got to check. You got to see where the wind is going. Of course, I'm inside right now, so there is no wind. But
You never know.
that's right. Um, but I say that stuff because I think that um, as an artist, or I think people that are not artists, they look at artists, and I think that they have thoughts about whatever the process is, or um, have you ever gone to a party, maybe a house party or something, or just a gathering, reception where you weren't playing,
Mm.
and um, and then it comes out during whatever discussion that you play saxophone,
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing that someone says is, "Oh, you should have brought your horn with you."
Yeah.
Would have loved it if you would have just came and played for us, right?
I'm sure you would have.
Right. And my thought is, wait a minute, you're a plumber, right? Why didn't you bring your plunger
Plunger.
with you? Man, I've been working on this toilet, and I knew that a professional could do a better job than I was doing. You know,
Oh, that's great.
but there's this idea that it's not really work, and it's just all atmospheric, and it's not really structured. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. Absolutely. I think when I realized like that writing was sort of a muscle that you have to keep strengthening, um, then it started to make more sense.
mm-hmm.
And like for example, I was mentioning the whole deadline thing, right? So if I know that I'm doing something, a record recording in September, and I want X amount of tunes, like I'll do the kind of the planning and what vibes am I looking for? I mean, it's much more formulaic than like what I thought it was in high school or college, where it's like, ooh, that song sounds pretty. Like, let's try this. You know, it's more like, okay, what's going to fit after this song? And like, I wanted to use that tune and that's that tempo. And like, what else do I need to fit in here? So like for this latest record that just came out last week, Firefly, I wrote most of the music in July and August. And then because we recorded it in COVID, we actually didn't have a rehearsal. We just like went in and did it. And that's totally anti everything that I thought, like writing and composing and fine tuning and, you know, doing 70 different takes and rehearsals and getting the piece to be perfect. Like I thought that's what it all was. But I guess now I'm just learning. For me, like with having a band, and I feel so lucky that the guys on my records are so amazing, like I would much rather just give them a little bit of direction and like have them make their magic than worry about, oh, should that be flat or sharp, or should that be, you know, a flat 5 or whatever. It's just like, it's all gonna happen.
Now, I find in my process, I'm very much influenced by who it is that I'm playing with.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and you know, if you have a lot of history with someone, you really know what they sound good doing, or at least what you like to hear them play, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you can kind of set them up.
Yeah.
You can say, "Hey, I got this thing. I know you're gonna dig this." You know, there's that. And the other question or other thing I was going to ask you is how sort of influenced or easily influenced are you by the music that you listen to? Now I know you're influenced by the stuff that you listen to. I mean, I get that. My question is more about, like, for instance, if I was to listen to, so I love Kenny Garrett.
Me too.
But if I listen to too much Kenny Garrett, I'll sound like Kenny Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason is because Kenny Garrett and I share the same primary influences, Coltrane and Sonny Stitt.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that just starts to come out, and then I can't control it. Right. Do you find either listening to certain composers or certain maybe certain pieces, like it's you know, it influences you, like easily influences choices that you make?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes to the point where it's like, okay, I can't do that. Yeah. Similar to what you're saying. I mean, I notice even if I'm at like a restaurant and they're playing something, like a couple days later, I could be humming it and be like, oh God, you know? And the problem is that you're not always hearing music that you like too. Like when you're walking through the mall or you're walking like whatever. And it's kind of like, wait, I don't want this in my head. Like, but I can't help. I just like, I don't know what it is. I can't stop something from going in my ears. So it's like, no. So I kind of have to do a little bit of a detox, I think, like before I'm going to write. Unless, you know, I guess the opposite of that is that sometimes I might have an idea of a vibe of something that I want to write, where maybe I want to challenge myself to write in a certain way that's like out of my comfort zone. Like, I don't know, thinking about like Joe Henderson's writing style or something like that, and like his harmonic structures, like things often moving in thirds, you know, the different chords like shifting in different centers. So that might be a sound that I want to explore. But it wouldn't be, okay, let me take Inner Urge and just play a solo over it. It's just like, oh, that's a cool concept. Like, I wonder, you know, if I'm stuck on a bridge or something, I'll think like, what are some concepts that I really liked? Like, okay, so, you know, Joe Hen has shifted like this, like maybe what's a way that I might want to try shifting in a different way, you know? So trying to use it to fuel my own voice and not just be like copying, I guess. That's the name of the game. That's like why we're here, right? It's like we don't want to sound exactly like somebody, but we use it because it's the tradition.
Right. You were talking about songs that um, that you don't want to be hearing, or you can't control what you hear. There's stuff gets stuck that you're like, why and do I keep singing this dumb nursery rhyme?
Mm-hmm.
I have a 7-year-old, so I have heard a lot of cartoon music. Now, there's a lot of great cartoon music, so that's not been all bad. And I try to shift him and point him towards like Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes, where the scores are amazing. You
Yeah.
know, but the, do you know the do you okay? So this is different different genre. This is a commercial music for Popeye's chicken.
Oh yeah.
The ooh baby, I got Popeyes. Yeah. So that's like stuck in my head all the time. I can't get it out. And I I thought to myself, you know what? It's stuck in my head anyway. I might as well just own it. So
I
I
thought you
tried.
were gonna say I might as well just go get some chicken.
To go right. Well, I probably do that too often. I'm
Yeah.
trying to cut back on that. But what I could do, but what I do with it is I try to embarrass my son as much as possible with it. So so okay. So he goes to a private school. He goes to a Catholic school, and he's in first grade. And before the pandemic, so he was going to another school, and I'm always the one that drops him off. And so when it was the school before the one that he goes to now, before the pandemic and everything, we all lined up with the kids, and then we let them go into their classroom, and then I'd leave, so I could do something to really embarrass him horribly. Like I give him a really big kiss on the side of the face, and and, and say, "Look, all your friends are looking," that kind
Oh.
of stuff. Um, but because of the pandemic and the way that they have the protocol set up, he's still been going to school, and it's still full day and everything.
Wow.
But the way that we do it is, say we drive around in the parking lot, and then we get out right in front of the school, and then the kids jump out, right, and it's a big line of cars. And so I started rolling the windows all the way down and singing that song as loud as I could, especially when I get to the front of the building. And he's like, "Daddy, stop singing that. They're gonna know it's me in here." I said, "This is wonderful. I'm gonna have a lot of years of fun with this."
That's so cute.
Uh,
Yeah. But
yeah.
and then watch out, because right, the next thing you know, you're writing a melody and you're like, why does that sound so familiar? You're like, all right, Popeyes, hit me up.
Yeah, it is funny how that stuff happens. I used to practice this. What is it? The Oliver Nelson Patterns for Jazz
Yeah.
Improvisation book.
Yeah.
Standard reference. I tell all my students you should own this book. I used that book as a warm up. I played it cover to cover for like 2 years.
Mm.
It's the first thing I did. Okay, I got the sound moving. Okay, page one. And I just went through the whole thing, and I never tried to place any of the patterns. There's no chords symbols in that book. It's just a bunch of patterns, and they're not necessarily organized in a particular. It's not discernible the way that they're organized, at least.
Right.
And so I play that thing every day, and it took me about 35 minutes to play it cover to cover. Still to this day, I mean, this is like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. To this day, I think I discovered a new pattern. Oh man, what's this? Oh, this is killing. It's something out of that book. The stuff that finally comes out. Oh, it's
I
funny.
know. Yeah, it is. Yeah, we think we think we're being original.
Now, so we did this Charlie Parker concert. Speaking of someone that was original, truly original,
Yeah.
and has been so profoundly influential. And in particular, when he was in that sort of 1946 to 49 kind of period of time, um,
Mm-hmm.
when he was playing with strings, he was a different. They say that he was. It's like he was a different person.
Yeah.
You know, um, he was practicing more. He had kind of chilled out on some of the extracurricular stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on time all the time. He was very punctual, all of that, and then it's described in what is it, in a biography, that he thought that he felt that the strings were taken from him. You know, when that whole thing, ended,
Mm-hmm.
and we know, Charlie Parker. It's a pretty tragic kind of story.
Right.
But what he left us with is tremendous, and I can't imagine what music would be like without his influence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that now this is going to sound like an obvious question, but you can go wherever you want to. I mean, how influential has Parker been to you?
Oh, yeah, very. I mean, I think the first thing I started doing after maybe playing along with some of the Aebersold, just standards, like to actually develop vocabulary, was go to his solos from the Omni book. I think the first one that I learned was off the record, KC Blues. And then um, when I got the book, I remember like obsessively going through it and being like, actually, I think that's an E flat, or like,
There's several mistakes in that book.
yeah.
I mean,
So
it's still pretty accurate. It's a high percentage of accuracy is still pretty good. But
yeah,
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 there are
I
lots of
agree. Yeah,
mistakes.
but I remember just like to that level, I think like early high school, just being super into it, and yeah, absolutely. And the record Charlie Parker with strings, I remember performing, I think Just Friends and Repetition, like towards the end of my time in high school before I went to college, and it just felt like I was floating, and that's what I mean. That's
Yeah.
what Bert sounds like. He's just floating and singing, and it was like, this is
Mm.
amazing, and there's just something about that sound, and then something about the way that, for somebody who I think everybody kind of equates with playing tons of notes and really just tons of lines and notes and up and down, like when he plays Everything Happens to Me and really just plays the melody the whole time through, very minimal 16th note lines, just beautiful like whole notes on that, if you're like to transcribe that, and it's like, wow, yeah, like that is beauty.
Yeah, and it's something that happened that is not. Um I don't hear this mentioned maybe as often as I think it should be. Is Parker really is the one that got that whole thing started? Jazz with strings. At
Mm-hmm.
least that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that he was the only one that ever did it. I'm sorry. Prior to him, I'm sure there are some examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really the one that made everybody want to do it.
Yeah.
And so like all of these great, um, you know, one of my favorites, the Metropole Orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
um, and composers like Klaus Ogerman, um, the Cityscape
Mm-hmm.
thing, Parker,
Mm-hmm.
um, and all of that stuff is like all facilitated and very much, uh, owes everything to that collection of concerts and the recording that we reference as being Charlie Parker with strings. Um, Terrific stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, I
absolutely.
just keep listening and keep listening and keep listening to nothing else and just keep listening.
Yeah, I mean, you find something new every time, and it just the what you're saying about his sort of change in character and personality, like during that time, demonstrating the seriousness in which he took, that project, also aligns with what we have learned about his focus and study of classical music and playing along with Rite of
Mm.
Spring and, quoting different little Stravinsky motifs and things like that, Firebird, all that stuff. Um, for somebody that, has, again, those stories of like extracurricular activities and somebody who created this whole shift with bebop to be so into and engaged with classical music is like, I think something, I don't know if people forget it, but it's just a good reminder. It's just like he wasn't, just because he was doing the next cool thing, like he wasn't ditching everything else that was out there.
Yes. Um, you know who Santi Runyon? Runyon products,
Oh,
um, uh, mouthpieces and ligatures, all kinds of interesting inventions for saxophone, woodwind instruments.
okay.
Um, but Santi Runyon is a, let's see, I guess he's a Chicago bass guy, musician, saxophone player,
Mm-hmm.
um, etude books and all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of stuff. But anyhow, apparently he gave Charlie Parker lessons, but Charlie Parker swore him to secrecy. He was not allowed to tell him because Santi is Caucasian. He was Caucasian, and Parker did not want it to get out that he was you know
Wow.
like, so there's that. There's something else that was interesting. That's interesting there too about Parker and his composition. So uh, again, I mean, we all know he's a great composer, but we don't talk about him as being a great composer because I think the language that he developed is so profound that I think it leaves anything else that's maybe any amount lesser profound than that sort of. But the composition is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's great, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was interviewing Paquito De Rivera, who was one of my big early influences, um, and Paquito was telling me because Paquito played with Dizzy,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was asking Diz some questions, and he asked Diz some questions about one question he asked him was about could Parker read music, and Diz was really offended by this. Say, how could you play any of the stuff that he could play if he couldn't read? Like this. So he took it was like that. But another question he asked him, or something that Diz volunteered, was that at one point Charlie Parker wanted to go and study at the conservatory of the French conservatory,
Oh, okay.
uh, and he didn't want to study saxophone. He wanted to study composition.
Wow.
That was something he wanted to do, and was even considering, uh, you know, pursuing that as the primary thing.
Hmm.
So that's an interesting thing, and that gives maybe some context to this sort of seriousness that he approached his composing with.
Yeah.
It wasn't just sort of improvised things over existing chord changes and then calling it a melody.
Mm-hmm.
Calling it a new tune, although he did do that.
Mm-hmm.
But just the structure of the tunes and the way they communicate, they serve as this beautiful vehicle for this language. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of my first influences, I would say, of course, Charlie Parker was a huge influence, but Phil Woods in particular was
Mm.
really big for me. I mean, because I could go and see him in person, and he, of course, was a direct sort of descendant through, Bird's tradition. And my teacher in high school had studied with Phil, and so that was kind of like my connection, and I
Right.
was just super, super into all of that. And then when you think about Phil marrying Chan and like the whole thing, I was just like in on I was like, I want to know all about this, just the fact that
Well,
it all could feel so close in
oh
history
yeah.
and in the timeline.
I wonder if she got tired of hearing certain questions about Charlie Parker all the time. It seems like that had to be like the usual thing. If
Yeah,
if somebody finds out who she was, it's like, wait a minute. I always had this one thing I wanted to know.
yeah, yeah. She's like, if I had a nickel. Um, but yeah, it was pretty crazy. I remember whenever I could, I would go and see Phil, and that felt like as close as I could get into like to seeing and hearing that live. And he was amazing. And I remember one time and a couple times maybe in high school and college getting to play with him and like just that force that he was.
Mm.
And so between like Bird and Phil and of course Cannonball and Sonny Stitt, I feel like those are I know you mentioned Sonny is a huge influence of yours. Those are probably and Kenny Garrett. The Dick Oates is also one of my top, so that's kind of my list right there, my fantasy alto team.
Yeah. I backed into Parker, so I was my first primary influence. My first two, I mean, Paquito was in there, and that's why I it was the thing that told me, man, I mean, you can really develop the altissimo range on the instrument and the kind of fluidity that he has. It's just like ridiculous. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of in my ear. And then the sort of precision and clarity that Sonny Stitt has with the articulation and just the clarity of language and everything. One thing about Sonny Stitt, which is this is fascinating, is a question that I frequently have asked all kinds of musicians, all kinds of jazz musicians, um, bass players, keyboard players, trombone players, everybody, saxophonists, of course, trumpet players, everybody. Um, when you ask it, everyone that has that sort of precision and accuracy as a staple in their playing, like it's always clear, it's always accurate, and there's no BS.
Mm-hmm.
They all say Sonny Stitt.
Yeah.
Every single one. They all say Sonny Stitt. It's incredible. There's a great bass player that worked at Ohio State, Andy Woodson. Andy Woodson. It's interesting. We share a birthday.
Hmm.
Um, we're some years apart, but we share the same birthday. So I
Mm-hmm.
always send him a text on my birthday, say the happy birthday, man. He says with the but he's a terrific, he's electric bass, acoustic bass, and everything. And I asked him that question. And he's Sonny Stitt. He was transcribing Sonny Stitt solos.
Really?
Right.
Wow. On bass.
So it's like this transcendent thing. It's very interesting, and I think the benefit of Stitt is that because of the precision and this sort of, though it is always sounds fresh and like it's the first time he played something, it's all very methodical, and you almost can. It's like you can't find a wrong note anywhere. There's no note that he ever plays that you can't justify, and there's
Yeah.
no rhythmic even the precision of when he plays triplets, when he plays it's really incredible. But that makes it really clear and easy to hear what it is that he's doing.
Yeah.
Whereas Parker is more quirky, and there's more sort of question marks as to like, well, wait a minute, why did he do that exactly? I can kind of see what's going on here, and so I think for that reason, I think Sonny Stitt was, it was kind of my earliest thing, and then I kind of backed into Parker. And the first recording that I heard with Parker was Dewey Square.
Mm.
I had this gig with my dad. It was like a reception, and we played standards or something. And this guy came up to me and he gave me some compliments, and he said, "Hey, have you heard Charlie Parker?" And at this point, I had not heard Charlie Parker. I was listening to a lot of Stitt, but I hadn't heard Charlie Parker. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Oh, you got to hear Charlie Parker." So he goes out in his car and he gets a cassette tape out of his car, Dewey Square. It was that record.
Nice.
And I still have it. And I, of course, I listened to that thing over and over and over. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a very like accurate, to me. It feels like an accurate kind of look at Stitt versus Bird. For me, when I was listening to the Boss Tenors record with Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt, that record, I could listen to the tag on "There's No Greater Love" like all day long. It just made me smile, like so much joy, so very pure, like pure placement, pure tone, just everything. And there's also like a propulsion to what Stitt is doing, whereas like there's an oomph behind every note. And whereas like, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like for Bird, it almost feels like, it could be like there's like a blur, and then here you are, and then what it was that, and then there you were, like the flurry of things where it's like he's like kind of flying above. And with Stitt, it's like he's like getting in there on the ground. I don't know how else to really say it. But yeah, that record from you, I think that was one of the first records I really, really got into Sonny's playing. And then I felt like I almost started to enjoy listening to tenor players more, even though I'm an alto player. Like I almost feel like my sound or just like general center like almost aligns more with like the range of a tenor. Even though I love playing up in that altissimo register, and like I loved your altissimo register. I remember on that, I think it might have been that last blues that we played, like super, like totally clean and clear and just like awesome. So it's not that I don't.
You later.
It's not that, because I also like to get up there too. But I don't know. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, like ever thought about it in that way, like, if there are any tenor players that have influenced your sound concept in that way, even though it's a different range and like almost a different animal in a way.
Have you heard you probably have, but the Coltrane has the Prestige box set, and it's a 16 CD box set. It's I've spent a lot of hours there, and okay, a little bit about the box set, and then I'll say what I actually wanted to say. That's a great box set because there's lots of standards. Okay, he's playing a lot of standards. It's a good place to learn standards.
Yeah,
it's a great box set because it's a clear stamp on a 2-year period of time, and people don't realize this, but he recorded all of that in 2 years. He signed this contract with Prestige, I like to think, largely because they would let him record as much as he wanted. Now, some of the stuff it's him as a sideman, but most of them are projects in his name.
Right.
On there's some alto playing. He's playing alto, and it's very interesting. I think it's either 2 or 4 tracks. I always get this mixed up, but I think it might just be 2.
I think it's 2, yeah.
Yeah, and immediately you know it's Coltrane because
Yeah.
it has this eerie sort of you know it's him. It has that same energy. It has the same timbre that you would expect him to have.
Hmm.
And of course, he's playing his vocabulary. Um, but that's not what he sounded like on alto before he played tenor, right? Because way early in his career, when he was trying to sound like Parker,
Yeah.
and that's what he sounded like. He sounded like Parker.
Yeah.
So then when he switches to tenor, Dexter Gordon being a pretty direct transference of Charlie Parker to tenor,
Hmm.
also with the tone conception. Because before Dexter, everybody's playing with a fluffy kind of sound.
Right.
So then, of course, Coltrane is very influenced by that. And then you can find some recordings, early 50s recordings, where you can swear up and down it's Dexter, and no, it's not Dexter, it's Coltrane. So he goes through all these evolutions. But I was out. But I wanted to say the thing about the Prestige thing because of his alto playing and how it sounds. Does he sound like a tenor player? Is that what I'm getting from hearing his alto playing, or is it just sound like Coltrane so much that I just I don't even recognize. I'm not even thinking about what instrument he's playing.
Right.
Like
It's like
it
the
just
inflection or something.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of like what I felt. I don't know if I felt that it was that obvious, like with Stitt. I think what hearing Coltrane on alto, it's like, oh yeah, like no brainer. That's Coltrane, and that's
Right.
crazy. But then with Stitt, I don't know that I felt that it was like that automatic, but it's certainly like obviously the same energy and inflection and
Right.
everything. But for me, I don't know if you play. I know you play primarily alto. I don't know if you had any periods of tenor in your life. I had like I have a few have an upcoming period of tenor for a short little bit, and I've had some longer stints. And for me, like I don't know that happens. I think sometimes it actually brings out like something different in my playing, and
Mm.
then coming back to altos almost like like back home.
So, my dad. So I started when I was young. I started when I was 6. My dad's a great saxophone player, and so I got 3 or 4 lessons a week. And in an attentive ear on the practice room, I lived with my teacher. So he had a real specific sort of philosophy on what the sort of skills that I needed to acquire. And so saxophone, flute, clarinet,
Yeah.
those were the instruments. And he insisted, especially with the flute, that I spent, the same kind of time developing that, because he recognized that later in my career, that would be something that would maybe that could separate me, or at least could get me a lot of musical gigs
Yeah,
and a
absolutely.
lot of gigs in big bands and stuff. And so I didn't start playing tenor until I was about, I don't know, 9 or something. But I still kind of considered myself to be more of an alto player until I got to college. And on all of the instruments that I play, um, the same stuff doesn't occur to me. So it's like a different. It's like I'm accessing a different part of my brain or something. Um,
Yes, me too. Yeah.
yeah, and that's a really good thing, especially as a composer. So mostly these days I play tenor when I'm
Oh,
playing like in a sort of quartet. When I'm playing with Dr. Thunder Quartet, it's mostly tenor and flute. When I'm playing with the CJO lately, they have me playing Barry, but I've played every chair except for lead alto in that band.
mm,
Um, and when I when I play at church, it's always alto. And part of the reason for that, it being always alto, is that the gospel saxophone thing, there's a clear tradition that heavily favors alto. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to find, you know, a lot of tenor in that sort of thing. So it really totally depends on what it is that I'm playing, who I'm playing with,
Right.
you know, and I'll do whatever you want, you know, whatever you need me to do. That's what I'm doing. So
Yeah. That's a good way to be.
yeah. But the thing you were talking about, Sonny Stitt, as far as his alto and his tenor not necessarily being like as directive of like, oh yeah, that's definitely Stitt. When you hear him play tenor, his sound on tenor is interesting. It in a sense, in a way, it doesn't seem to it doesn't connect in the same way that Coltrane's sound does. Like, I'm not surprised that Coltrane sounded the way he did on alto.
Right.
After hearing the sound that he got on tenor. But hearing Sonny Stitt's sound on tenor, it almost sounds like a pre-Dexter kind of nuance to the sound, in a matter of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But he's playing all that bebop vocabulary. So, yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've gone this far in on the saxophone nerding out. It's awesome.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again.
Yeah.
I have I've got a live stream that I do every Wednesday. I don't know, maybe we could do something there that could be fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And or, you know, maybe in a few months or something, I have you back here, and we can kind of continue on.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate you doing this, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I hope you did too.
Yes, I did. It was so fun to hang and see you, and to have played briefly in Columbus. I hope we can do it again. And I loved Columbus. I have to say, I was a big fan. I had some good food, and I'm ready to hit the places that I missed.
Yes, Columbus is a nice place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. Nice kind of Midwest kind of vibes and family values and all that kind of good stuff. There's a lot of that stuff happening in Columbus.
Nice.
Also, the cost of living is nice and Midwest. Yes.
Amazing. You're awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, Shawn. Thanks for having me, Dr. Thunder. And great to be here in line. You got like an amazing lineup of people. So thanks for including me.
Absolutely. Well, God bless you.
Bye.
I'll see you.